Hey, we're on? Welcome to Tech Topics. I'm Doug Crawford. We're doing our first show of 2013. Happy New Year. And we're doing something a little different today. You'll notice both paddles are moving here on the Pong screen. I actually have a competitor with me on the set, and it is our intern, Marilyn. Welcome to my show.
Hi, Doug.
Hi. Good morning. Happy New Year. How are you?
Great. How are you?
Awesome. Real good. And today we are covering something pretty interesting. I'm moving from the PC training into talking a little bit about the iPad, the Apple iPad. And it's been out for a few years, so many people are very familiar with it, but I know that there is a large segment of the population that is not using them. In fact, Marilyn is not using an iPad device. As a matter of fact, so let's get a context here. What I intend to do is show Marilyn the iPad, and we're hoping that will be an interesting introduction to folks who have not really gotten to handle one before. So you will see her handle it as if it's in the hands of someone who hasn't gotten to play with one yet, and you'll get to play with it.
Great.
And I look forward to your what you discover. Hopefully is interesting and is a discovery experience for people who watch this. So you do not even have a smartphone at this point, I think. Is that correct?
No.
You use a texting phone?
I suppose that's what it's called.
Okay, which is what I use also, because I just prefer to kind of have a phone and a texting mechanism. But an iPad is actually something very different. As a matter of fact, you weren't here at the time, but early on in the Tech Talk part of this show, when I was doing it as Tech Talk live, we talked about the iPad as being kind of an interesting device in that some folks may get away with using an iPad exclusively as their computer. So the question really at hand at the time was, what would be a good computer for someone who's going to only use it a little bit, like, say, my grandmother, who just wants to check something on the web or wants to learn about email and doesn't want to use a computer a lot, wants something easy to use. Well, a recommendation at the time was to use an iPad. So, well, let's get started, shall we?
Okay.
Okay. All right. So, let's see what we got on a close shot here. All right, this is an iPad here, Marilyn, in the flesh. It's an old one. This is an iPad 1. Do you know what the current iPad
I think
number
they're
is
up
that's been
to
released?
4. Is it up to now?
4, I think so. Or it's coming out. Yeah, actually, I haven't really been keeping up with it because the iPad 1 does everything that I've needed. However, as it is going with our web-enabled computing products like our phones and these iPads, the speed at which they're producing new versions is increasing all the time. So this one has basically done still everything that I've needed to do, even though they've had all these new releases. So here we are with an original iPad. It's a full computer, Marilyn, in itself. So what are we looking at here? We're looking at a dark black screen, right?
That's really amazing.
Isn't that awesome? Yeah. So it looks like it's not on, doesn't it?
No, it doesn't.
It actually is on. Like our laptops, it actually can be on all the time and really ready to go, even though it looks like it's off. So let's introduce, before you even turn this thing on or make it display something, let me describe to you what we have here. We have this is an iPad that's sitting in a frame that is an extra add-on that doesn't come with the iPad. Okay, and I'm not sure this particular model is available anymore. I got it at, I think, one of the very inexpensive dollarish store type stores. So it came and went, but it's a really nice one. If you can find something like this for an iPad that props it up, it really makes it very useful. If you take this off, the iPad won't stand up at all. It sits flat on the table. So there, oddly enough, do you know what the primary user interface is for this? How you actually talk to it?
Touchscreen.
It's touchscreen, right? Exactly. But it's not just touchscreen. It has a couple of buttons. It has a button here. It has what is really its power button up here. And it has what looks like one button in this particular thing because it's covered up, but there's an up and down button here that's used usually for volume, almost always for volume control. So it's a multimedia
Okay.
device. It plays music and video and web and like we're kind of used to with our computers now.
And
But-
can you put a disc into it? Is there like a disc drive in there?
Good
Or-
question. Actually, there isn't. There is a port on the bottom that you can add some devices to. I have not bothered to yet. So I think the reason is because it's connected to the internet, the presumption was that everything that would come onto the device and off of the device would go probably over the internet. So, however, a cable does go onto here that connects over to your computer, and that's used to set it up initially, which we're not going to really talk about here. It's kind of a technical detail, and it gets too deep too fast, so we're not going to talk about it. But I did want to point out that there's very limited buttons on it. It's almost all touchscreen.
Now, I
interface.
noticed there was a button above the up and down arrows. What does that do? This
You're
right
right.
here.
That is another button. I was thinking that was the headphone jack, but in fact, there's a headphone jack up here. This button's never been used on this iPad. So what does it do? I'm pretty sure it locks it,
Oh, okay.
but I'm not absolutely certain.
Puts it on hold.
Yeah, I think it puts it on hold.
Yeah.
It's an actual physical slider switch that has an orange dot when you slide it to the side, which I think locks it. Well, didn't lock that one because that just turned it on. So you know what? Maybe we'll use the iPad to find out what that button does
Okay.
as an exercise because I never used it. Okay, so we saw the screen come on for a second there.
Yeah, it was exciting.
Yes, that was because I touched one of the up and down buttons, which is enough to, let's call it, wake up the iPad. So it looks like it's off. We said it looked like it was off before. We woke it up by touching a button. It touched the screen, and it doesn't know that we're here by touching the screen, but it takes a physical button to actually wake it up. So usually, like on an iPhone, this button down here is kind of meant to be the main button that you use whenever you need a button to touch. It's probably going to be this button that you hit. So let's hit that one and let's get started with this. All right, so we've just woken up the iPad. Now it turns its screen on. Why do you suppose it turns the screen off like that?
Probably because it realizes that you're not using it, so
Okay.
it just kind of goes back to sleep. Would be
All
my
right.
guess.
And I didn't want to just spell it out, but there's probably folks out here who might not perceive why it even would want to turn the screen off.
To conserve battery power?
Conserve battery power, is it? Yep. So that helps the battery last real long. As a matter of fact, the battery does last about 10 hours or more
Wow, that's great.
on this. So it does make it a very practical portable machine. You can charge it up overnight and use it pretty much all day long, and maybe a few days before you got to put it back on the charger.
And that's a lot longer than most typical laptops last, right?
It is. It is.
So that's more convenient.
By about how much do you figure?
Well, my battery only lasts about 2.5 hours. So.
That's not very long.
No.
Yeah, for a laptop. So, yeah, I would say easily 3 to 4 times longer than a laptop. Okay, so let's get her back energized again. All right, and like our cell phone, even texting cell phones like mine, my texting cell phone, there's a lock screen that prevents unauthorized access. So on the iPad here, you grab this little button and slide it over to start her up.
Ooh.
Yeah. Which brings us to, guess what this is called?
Homepage?
Yeah, I think some people do call it a homepage. From the PC world, I call it a desktop, and I may not be using the right terminology. Homepage. All right. So on the screen are a bunch of little square pictures. What do you suppose those are?
Applications?
Yes, applications. And so my dad goes crazy when he hears about an iPad or an iPod and the apps. You got to get an app for this and an app for that. And he's very frustrated by, what's an app? Where do I get an app? What do I do with an app? Right? So I can understand the frustration because we've changed terminology.
Right.
What do we call them on our computers?
Software or just programs?
Programs, right. So a whole new terminology. What does app mean to you now as you've just, I know you don't use an iPad, you don't have an iPhone, but what do you think, how would you would define a distinction between an app and a program?
An app, I feel like it's just a smaller, more condensed program. Ones that can run on smaller machines like this. You wouldn't necessarily, I think, see an app on a laptop, but you would see them on this because they're just built for.
That's a great definition.
New mobile devices.
Yeah, it's a great definition. She's absolutely right. An app is just a small program. It's just, we use them the same way as we use programs on our computers, but the inference is that the functionality is much more constrained. It's much simpler. Right? So we're going to explore a few of the typical apps. I thought that would be useful. In order to show folks what kind of small features there are, and you'll see, I think you'll experience then how, you'll actually be demonstrating for folks how limited in functionality the apps are, yet people still find them useful.
Right.
So maybe we've gone like way far overboard on the PC side. Everything's way complicated, and that's why I have a hard time getting people to get more into it. Into their computing features, because maybe they are too complicated. But so we'll look at a couple of apps, but before we go into an app, let's look a little bit around this desktop, what did you call it?
Homepage?
Homepage, yes. In fact, homepage is probably good because what you're looking at is one of 3 of these displays that are available, and there's a little dot down here that, what did I do? I launched an app already. Okay, there's 3 little dots that are probably hard to see on the camera, and the center dot is lit, which means that this particular display is the center of the 3. So there's one off to this side and one off to this side. And to examine it, to examine the other home pages, the other desktops that are part of the home page, you swipe the screen. So try swiping to the left or to the right. All right, so it turns out that the one that was over here, which we swiped to, is set up to bring up a search. And if we really didn't want to do that, how do you suppose you get out of this thing? Like perhaps we don't even know what this is. We just got our iPad and we swiped the screen and up came this thing. What do you think is probably the way to get this out of the way?
Just to get the keyboard down or to go back to our home page?
Well, let's say to get the keyboard down, maybe.
Get that down that way.
All right. And how did you figure that? How did you figure that
There
was
was a
the
little
case?
icon on the right-hand corner.
All right. Let's see if we can redisplay it. Yep, okay.
So
So down here you saw a little keyboard and an arrow that's underneath the keyboard that kind of indicates make the keyboard go back down again.
Right.
It came up, it goes back down. Well, you were absolutely right, and you have some orientation to how user interfaces work on computing devices, even though you don't have an iPad. So you were able to kind of just look at this and guess a meaning for that. Well, you know, when you get an iPad, that might be the way that you learn everything on it, because guess what? You get no manual.
Really?
No
Wow.
manual comes with the iPad.
Can you download one online? Is there a PDF or something?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
But they don't make it really, really easy. You might think that would be the first button when you first turn on your iPad would be, get me the manual. But I haven't read a lot about it, but I have to guess that they thought that most people buying these have some orientation that's enough that they can figure it out. But if you are coming at computing, and this is really your first computer, and honestly, I understand where you're coming from in that case. You just didn't have a need for a computer before, and this is, as we recommended, maybe a first computer for some people. You're not going to have that background, right? So you
That'll
will
be
need to get the manual online, and if we continue exploring the iPad as a learning tool for learning pad computing in general, we'll show you how to do that. But so what Marilyn did in figuring out how to get rid of the keyboard was the kind of thing that most folks are going to have to do. So let's get rid of that keyboard again, and we're now on. Can you tell the folks where the dots are there on that display?
The dot is over to the left.
Over to the left,
so it's
okay.
The first of 3 dots.
All right, so now there's a center screen over to the right of this, and then there's a further right-hand screen further over. So let's swipe all the way across them and look at them all.
Okay.
Yeah,
This
okay,
one,
so
okay.
which one is that one?
That's the middle dot.
The middle one? And these are the apps that Apple thought were the most frequently used ones, so they put them on the front. So let's look at the right-hand one. Okay, and these apps are mostly ones that I've added onto it. They go onto the second page by default. And there is a clever way to move these things around, but we're not going to show that quite yet. So now, when you swiped there, some things moved on the screen and some things didn't. So let's swipe back to the center and watch carefully what happens. All right. So everything up in this area changed, but these didn't. What do you think of that?
Is that the dock? Is that the main ones that don't change?
Does it look like another machine that you might have seen? Although, yeah, you have one. And now I know you have one.
It's kind of similar to the MacBook or other Mac products have that same interface.
Yeah, Macintosh. What does Macintosh do? What do they use that for? Can you tell the folks?
That's the main dock that you can pull applications down into that, and they'll always be on your screen.
Okay, so if I might paraphrase, your most frequently used applications are down there. And that's essentially what the iPad has tried to replicate here, is to make it look like the Mac, so it'd be familiar for Macintosh users. So to teach folks what's going on, these pictures down here are really not any different than the ones up here. They are applications. They're just more fundamental applications that you probably will be using all the time, and Apple wanted them to be available no matter what page you happen to be scrolling to.
Now, with these pages, can you add other pages to slide to, or do you need to have 3? Is there only 3 that you can have, or can you have more than 3?
That's a good question. On this iPad, it may be different than the other ones, but I believe there's only 3.
Okay.
Because I've never needed more than 3, and I haven't explored that. So it's a good question. I think you're fixed at 3. Could be wrong. So these apps down here are probably the first ones we should take a look at. And okay, yep. So let's start with the first one, Safari. What does Safari mean to you? You mean something, I think, because of your Mac experience.
As a Mac user, it means that's the internet. So I'm sure for Windows users, they would be more familiar with Internet Explorer, which is an E icon, like a little Saturn ring around it.
Right.
For Mac, it's Safari, because I think they like to be more artistic with their descriptions.
Yes, they do.
I don't know why, but maybe they get a kick out of it.
And they illustrate it with a compass. Like,
right.
That's the way
You're
to find your way.
You're navigating through the safari of the web, you know. The California people, you know, it's always got to be more creative.
Yes, they do.
You could just say Internet Explorer like Windows users, but no, I got to make a Safari. But
All right. Yeah. So actually, that is our web browser.
yeah.
Yes, like Internet Explorer if you have a PC. It does the same thing. I've been talking for weeks about a browser on the PC called Firefox. It's another browser. They're all programs that help you navigate around the World Wide Web and find information or, well, yeah, basically information. Right? Get information off the web. Before we launch into that, though, we're going to be using the screens more, and I thought we would play with the screen a little bit first. So you've already done some movements on here. You've done some swiping like this. You've touched the screen. Looks like our fingers are floating right on top of the screen. We're actually physically touching the glass here on this, in this demonstration. And you notice there's no, what on a PC when you're moving a mouse around on your table, what do you see on the screen moving around that we don't see here?
Normally you see a cursor in the shape of an arrow.
Yes.
But there's no cursor.
And we call that our mouse, right? Or our mouse pointer, right? We get no mouse pointer. Our finger, as it approaches the screen, is our mouse pointer. And this actually leads to some usage problems that maybe we'll talk about as it maybe comes up. But there's no way to point at something without actually activating it here. Well, there is a way, but it's a little, essentially, whatever you touch is going to launch. Now, if you put a glove on, if you wear gloves, if you were using this outside, do you suppose you could operate this?
Actually, I just found out they make special gloves now, just for that
Why?
problem.
Why special gloves?
Because the sensors won't pick it up if it's between the cloth, as far as I know.
The
and
sensor, the screen.
The screen won't, the sensor on the screen,
Okay.
if you're wearing gloves, won't pick it up. Or maybe people have had problems with that. So they've
Wait a minute.
developed these new
what
gloves.
sensor on the screen? All I see here is glass.
Well, that's the
There's
magic, I
some
suppose.
magic. Okay, yeah, you're right. Okay, so there's a sensor on this whole thing that is what picks up the fact that you've touched it. But I guess the point I'm going after here is that it is not a pressure-sensitive device. That's why it doesn't work with a glove on, because what it's actually sensing. Let's try touching it with the pencil and push on it. We get nothing. All right, so that has made contact. You even heard the tap there, right? But nothing registered. Our finger registers. So what is actually being sensed here is charge. I'm playing Mr. Science now. The charge built up in your body, that you're acting like an antenna, and you're collecting charge out of the air, and it's sensing the charge that we've got, and a static electricity sensing is what's going on. So they make things called styluses that will allow the charge to travel down and be sensed at the end of the device. So if you touch with this guy, actually it works. So if you want to use something to activate the screen other than your finger, it has to carry a charge down. It has to be built actually for one of these screens. So
where can you
then
get one
found,
of those?
Most stores that sell anything electronic in a phone or a screen, they carry these too. I got this at one of those inexpensive $1-ish kind of
You seem
stores.
to frequent those stores.
I do seem to frequent them, yes. That's all I can afford to shop at. That's why I have an iPad
You spent all your
1.
money on the iPad. That's what happened.
A while back, I spent some money on the iPad, but in fact, I bought this used too. So,
Oh, man.
yeah, I'm not real good for the local economy. But,
Well, don't talk to
Yeah,
Wheel to
buy
the Future.
local.
They wouldn't like that.
don't talk to
Don't
me.
talk to the people at Wheel to the Future. They wouldn't like that. You
Oh,
have
that's
you have
right.
to buy local.
That's right. Good point. Yes.
It's not an option.
Yes. Please buy your laptops local, folks. All right. So what do we learn here? The screen is touch sensitive to your finger, but not to non-metallic things like plastic. Let's see. Oh, let's talk about one other thing. Okay. We'll probably actually only get into an app next week. We're
Okay.
probably not going to get there. We may not get there. We got a few minutes left. If you could lean forward and pick this up, I wanted to show people how let's see if we can get you lean forward and try to hold this up yeah, that's all right. Yeah, here, turn it that way. Yeah. All right, so we've been sitting this thing on the table in that orientation, and top has been top and bottom's been bottom, and the text is in the right direction, but when this is not really made to be on a table, it's made to be held in your hands
Right.
and used in your hands. So folks may not realize this, they haven't played with one, but it has a sensor in it as to a kind of gyroscopic, which way is up, and it turns the screen so that the bottom is always the bottom and the top is always the top. And most programs will redraw themselves and orient themselves to match the way you're holding it, which is really, really cool. This is the first time we've had that kind of a handheld device. iPad brought that to us first. All right. Gosh, we're almost done here. So let's go on the web. I've already set up this device to talk to our wireless network. So if you were to bring this home, a little bit of setup would be required to get this talking on your home wireless network. And if you don't have a home wireless network, you're going to probably want one. So next week, let's bring up the browser. Next week we'll show how to use these apps. There's some fun surprises. Let's show them a pinch zoom. Have you ever used a device that you could touch two places and zoom the screen? I think it will work here on this.
Can you just do like this?
Yep.
It zooms in.
Yeah,
There you
that's
go.
one of the primary touch gestures on these iPads is you touch two places and squeeze together and spread apart to do a magnification. And the special thing about the iPad is how beautifully and smoothly it follows your movements. So we'll go into more of that, and we'll go into the elementary applications that are here, and we'll find some useful things here.
Great.
Well, thank you so much
Sure,
for joining
thank
me.
you.
I think we'll go out with a little bit of Pong action, since I have a player here to actually do this. It's been great. I really appreciate your participation
No
in our
problem.
pad show. And I think it really added some interest and some extra information coming forth to you from our show at PCTV. And we'll see you. You'll see us new show next week. Try to put out one of these a week. Maybe airing first on Wednesday nights at 7:30. I am Doug Crawford for the Tech Equalizer. You can get a hold of me at thetechequalizer.com if you need any computer services. Techequalizer.com. All right, you're ahead by one. I'm coming at you now. or